Awesome. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for watching. I am going to share a wonderful story today, and I'd like to have you specifically kind of share your story and introduce everyone to kind of where you've been, where you came from, how we started working together and so forth. So let's go back in time for a moment.
Got it.
And we're going to go from today, which is an awesome day, lots to celebrate, to where you were even before we met. Like, tell us a little bit where your fertility journey started.
Um, well, it was about 6 years ago. My husband and I decided it was time to try to have a baby. And we thought it was going to be easy. My mom has, she had 7 easy pregnancies. My sister has 2, and we didn't really anticipate having issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we started trying. It was about 18 months in. I got pregnant the first time and had a miscarriage. About a little over a year later, I started having IUIs done at a local clinic, and those, the first one was unsuccessful. The second one lost that baby, and then we did about 4 more and got to the point where they told me I needed to change medication, do things that were more invasive, and I just felt like that wasn't the right thing. I couldn't shake it. And I don't really remember where I first heard about you. It was a webinar, a fertility webinar. I think you were talking about recurrent loss specifically.
I think I was, well, based on your
right. I think that was what it was. And I really liked your manner, and the things that you were saying made sense. And so I did some research, and I eventually said, okay, I need a consult with this guy. So, we started working together, got your input on what was going on, and here we are. So that's the Cliff Notes.
Well, it's funny because I'm looking at I think the first email that you sent me I'm looking up because I'm looking over at my other screen,
right?
And I'm looking at the first email that you had sent me, and you had done a lot even before reaching out to me and working with me, and I think it's I think for the people watching, they don't always know when's the right time to call and reach out to somebody. And I'll say it's different for everybody, but certainly it's not like you weren't proactive about what you were doing. I mean, you even came to me with a handful of test results and so forth. So when you finally reached out to me and we started working together, what did you know about your situation? What didn't you know about where you were at?
I knew that we had a couple of genetic issues, and the MTHFR and factor 5.
Yep.
I knew about that, and I had done some reading on how to treat the MTHFR, but so far, or at that point, hadn't found a doctor that was going to treat it the way that in my gut I knew it needed to be treated, which was not with Fulgard, not with the folic acid.
Right.
That was the biggest thing. I'm like, well, I have to do my own thing because nobody knows what to do with this.
Right.
That was really frustrating because I felt like that's the only thing you can find. It's got to be a big deal. And it wasn't being treated that way. So I knew that, didn't really know much else. And,
Yeah, I mean, and with that information, I was like, okay, well, we need to dig deep. We know these are factors involved, but I think we need to also dig deeper and see if there's anything else. And you and I went back and forth about talking about different options in terms of testing, like what does it make sense to do? What doesn't it make sense to do? you know, because it's all a financial cost as well. And,
Right.
you know, often I always hope that we're not going to find anything in those tests, right? You know, so it's like, I always, I think I may even have said this to you, like, I always think it's a good thing when we feel like we wasted our money versus,
Right.
you know, versus, oh yes, we found something, you know, it's awesome.
Right.
Um, but we were pretty cautious about the testing that we did, you know, for you, and it didn't necessarily give us a ton of new information,
Right.
but more clarified, I think, for me, where and how we needed to focus our attention in creating your plan.
I felt like that too.
Yeah. And then so we had our first consultation, we started working together. How was the experience for you in working with me, and what did you start to learn through that process in the beginning?
It was a totally different experience. I felt like you were looking for answers as opposed to putting a band-aid on the problem. My husband had said to me multiple times, you know, maybe we just can't force it. Maybe this is just forcing it, you know, about the IUIs. And
Right.
I felt like giving up on that was giving up completely. And that put us at odds a little bit. And
Yep.
when I started working with you, I felt like there was an opportunity to find the answers and to keep trying without forcing it, without, you know, we had a way to bring healing to something that needed attention. And I'd felt like there was something that needed attention, but I had no idea where to look, no idea where to start. And it didn't seem like anybody that I was working with was interested in pursuing that. So that was the biggest difference. And that brought me so much peace on the road that, I mean, it was a turning point for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the dramatic shift that you made. I think it was just even like a month into the plan. Once we started working on you know, we went through the plan and we went through it together and so forth. I think you had such a
Yeah.
huge change and huge shifts. And I think one of the bigger things for me in knowing your case and looking back at your case now is that, you know, it's not like you came to me with a lot of answers already, but no one had put
Mm-hmm.
together the proper plan to address those issues.
Right.
And that's really, I think, one of the things that made, you know, the more dramatic shift, if you will, in your progress, because you were in after a month, and it wasn't easy, but it got easier with all the dietary changes and
It did.
lifestyle
It
changes and
did.
everything.
Yep.
But within that first month, I just remember our second consultation when you were like, I feel very, very different.
I did. I didn't. It's one of those situations where you spend so long feeling a certain way that it becomes your normal and
Yeah.
you don't realize how bad you actually feel. And I was really surprised when I started feeling so much better. I was very surprised. I didn't realize that I felt as run down as I did, and I think some of that was emotional and
Yeah.
psychological.
Yeah.
And having a real plan, having something that I felt like was going to work, that was really helpful. But so were the physical effects, the supplements and the diet, and I learned a lot about my body and about how I respond to certain things. Um, I remember that, you know, realizing things, you know, how I'd respond to certain things or how I'd feel after I ate something. You know, I learned a lot, and that was really exciting too, because it felt like it was measurable progress now.
Yeah. Well, it teaches you to be more aware and like, okay, if I eat these things, I feel great. And if I don't eat these things, I feel terrible. And so, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I can start to balance those things out.
Yep.
So, you know, for everyone listening, so even though, you know, in that first month, I remember our first two consultations, you did start to make dramatic shifts, and we started seeing
Mm-hmm.
some nice progress. And it is, what you just said, like you forget how you should feel because you're so used to feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
And I definitely saw that kind of brightness and that spirit come back to you. Although I didn't know you beforehand, but yeah.
You get the idea.
I could guess. But so that was, I'm looking back at dates, right? So that was our first follow-up consultation was October, which means we started working prior to that. Let's just say September.
It was. My sister got married right before.
That's right.
The weekend before I started the program, my sister got married. I said, I'm not doing this while I'm dealing with her wedding.
No, you can't. No.
So, yep, I remember that.
And I think, one of the harder things after you started to make some good progress and after we started to see the change and notice the proper changes, I think one of the harder things, not just for you, but for everybody, but, we're talking about your case, was the keeping the persistence, like keeping the momentum going and knowing that you're doing all the right things, even though you're not necessarily seeing that final result that you want to see. Am I correct?
Right. Yeah. It was hard because I didn't really know at that point what to expect. How long should it take, and should I be worried yet? But it didn't end up being that bad because after we addressed some of the physical issues, I did a lot of emotional work to work on that side of things, and that made a big difference. And I started seeing my from an emotional standpoint, my energy changed and my mindset changed, and
Love it.
that made it a lot easier. And then the last thing that made it easier was that the start of this year, we just kind of made some radical changes in our life, my husband and I. So
yeah,
that also, I hate to say this because I heard it so many times and I really hated to hear it when I heard it, but it kind of was a back burner thing for a little bit. It's not that we weren't trying, and it's not that each month wasn't a little bit disappointing, but there were other things like, I've got to pack up my house. I've got to move. I've got a closing date in a month. I've got to, get this ready and this ready. And now we're living in a camper building our house. So,
right.
we had a lot happen in that time frame that we were working together before I got pregnant. So the way it worked out was really good. And I think it was exactly how it needed to happen. And
exactly.
So
yeah.
That's where I'm at. And I know it's really easy to say that when you're here and not in it, but it really did. That's how it felt. And I think once you're, if you know that that's how it is, that it kind of becomes easier in a way, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it, just because you got that positive pregnancy test in May doesn't necessarily mean that everything was over, that the journey was over because of your history, right? So we still had to get through that process and that hump.
Yes.
Which you absolutely did, obviously, because now how far along are you?
22 weeks.
It's awesome.
The little boy. We're really excited.
As you should be.
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
And, look, you put in so much work physically, emotionally, in your life with you and your husband. It really just shows how much it shows how much the hard work really can pay off if it's done the right way and you're able to follow through. And just like you had said, it's important you start to see those baby steps and see those changes and that progress, and it gives you that motivation to keep going and continue to stay with it. Those questions when you're doing all the right things and that final result's not happening, those questions still will always come, like, is there something more? Am I doing all the right things? What am I missing? Right? Those things come up.
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Always.
But it's about trusting in yourself and in the process and what you're
Mhm.
doing, and certainly it paid off for you. So, you know,
Exactly.
yeah. Um, I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you, and thank you for joining me today to share some of that. Any last things you'd like to say to everybody listening?
Um, Stick with it. You cannot,
Yeah.
you know, your ending, whatever it is, it's going to come in whatever way it's supposed to. And I know that can look very different for everybody, but you've got to stick with it because the hard work, like you said, it pays off, and you do have to do the work. It's hard and uncomfortable, and it makes you look at yourself a different way, and makes you it makes you evaluate your priorities, and it kind of forces you to put yourself first. And I think especially as women, we don't do that. We like to be we have this idea that we need to be the martyr and do everything and be
Mm-hmm.
superwoman, and it really helps to prioritize yourself. I think in this process, prioritizing yourself is really big. So those are some little pieces of advice, I
I think
guess
it's
I
I
would
think
say.
it's huge. I think it's huge. I think those points are really, in terms of like two ending points, are really, really important to prioritize yourself, and you don't have to continue to be the martyr that you think that you need to be. You
Right.
take priority in yourself and your health, and get the results that you're looking for. So, yeah,
Yep. However
really,
they're supposed to come.
exactly, really
And
powerful
thank
work.
you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thank you. I mean, it was working with you was the start of it was a massive turning point for a lot of different levels, and it was the first step that I needed to take, I think, in really changing how things were going and figuring out what needed to be done and what needed to be addressed, and it really was.
Oh, I appreciate it. That's sweet. Yeah. I really enjoyed working with you, and knowing and seeing the change and knowing how much effort you were putting into it. So, I feel the same way. Yeah. Well, thank you. I hope this was helpful to everybody. I appreciate your time. Um,
Absolutely.
and all right, everyone. Bye.